It's been almost a year since Apple released the iPad Air 4. Since then, there's been a whole new generation of computers. There's been a whole new generation of tablets. It seems like every major player in the tablet space has released something since this baby came out. I mean, Apple themselves released their updated Pro models with their incredibly powerful M1 processors. But you know what? Even with all of those other options out there, you should still buy the iPad Air 4. So why is that? Let's find out. See, it works perfectly. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. No kidding, this tablet is amazing. Like, even with a bunch of other high-end options out there, it's real hard to recommend anything else because of how hard this thing slaps, especially at this price point. But before we start heaping too much praise on the device, a couple of notes. One, nobody is sponsoring this video or gave me this tablet. I bought it and have been using it and enjoying it over the past several months. Number two, no, I don't actually want you to buy everything in the You Should Buy series. You Should Buy is more about the positives of consumer technology instead of all the negativity that you can find on the internet. And number three, I don't know, you got me. You called my bluff. I don't actually have a number 3. I just kind of got caught up in the excitement of the moment. And look, numbered lists, kind of my thing. As it's been a while since we've talked about the Air, let's quickly cover the specs and pricing if you don't remember what any of that actually is. The iPad Air can be found on Apple's website for $599. At that base model, you'll get 64 gigabytes of storage, the A14 processor, a fully laminated display, and okay, really quickly, because I see this a lot in the comments, if you don't know what a laminated display is, that just means the glass covering the display and the display itself are physically bonded together into a single piece of like a display. Non-laminated displays will have a small difference between those sections. So, okay, back to the Air. You will also have several color options and a tablet that looks remarkably similar to the iPad Pro 11-inch model. You really only have one other option when it comes to storage, and that's to bump it up to 256 gigabyte for $749, and you can get versions with cellular service for about $130 more, priced on top of that $599 or $749. And that's the quickest we've been through specs recently. I love when there isn't a huge range of options that we need to slog through. But the specs aren't perfect. If we were to take a quick dig at the specs, no, I'm not overly happy about 64 gigabytes being the standard storage option. When it comes down to why you should buy the iPad Air, it really boils down to two main arguments: the price and the performance. And let's start off with the price. It's $599. That's from Apple directly. That's $200 cheaper than the closest model of the iPad Pro. And you might think to yourself, Gary, $200 isn't that big of a difference between them, but at these price points, $200 is almost a 50% increase in price. Additionally, in just a quick Amazon search, I found brand new versions of this Air for $499, making that twice the price difference between the two models. Yes, you will get 128 gigabytes of storage on the M1 variant, but I'm not sure that's worth doubling the cost, especially when bumping up the Air to 256 gigabytes still ends up being $150 cheaper than the M1 iPad Pro. Those are awesome prices, and I want you to keep this in mind for the rest of the video, because this isn't a watered down version of anything. This in fact has 95% of iPad functionality for 50% of the cost or less. Okay, let's move over to the performance. And as it's a touchscreen tablet, I'm not just talking about under the hood performance, but I'm also talking about functional performance of the device too. As you'll be able to see from just looking at this, you'll still get the new Apple design language with a very large and very beautiful 10.9-inch Retina panel right on the front. In fact, you really have to stare down the bezels of this and the iPad Pro to tell the difference. And if I didn't know which one was which, if I didn't have this little camera bump here telling me which was which, I would have a real hard time telling them apart. The only real functional differences between the two versions are, one, that camera bump we mentioned earlier, two, the iPad Air has a slower refresh rate panel than the Pro model, and really the only way for me to show that to you right now is I will record these in slow motion, and you will notice the Pro is a little smoother, but in real use, again, is that worth double the cost? Well, not according to this video, it isn't. And the iPad Pro models will go up to 600 nits of brightness, where the iPad Air 4 will go up to 500 nits. I'm not sure 100 nits is the biggest brightness difference you'll see in the tech display game, but it could come into being an issue if all you wanted to do was use a tablet outside. This is the third time I'm going to say this, I still don't think it's worth double the cost though. Another main functional takeaway is if you are somebody that likes Touch ID over Face ID, the iPad Air 4 is the only current model, new generation looking iPad that has Touch ID built into it. It's got this neat little trick of having the sensor built into the lock screen button. It's not 100% accurate, but it is very accurate, and it's better than nothing. And if you are somebody teleworking, or if you are working in a mask-constrained environment, it's way better for Face ID if you're trying to get authentication done in your tablet. Besides that, the main selling point of the body is just how close it is to the iPad Pro. It's very surprising to me that Apple made the Air as good as it is because of how much it really replaces that smaller 11-inch iPad Pro as the more entry-level high-end tablet. Entry-level high-end tablet doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is the easiest way to get into that high-end looking tablet. The Pro version does have Thunderbolt connection, while the Air has a standard USB-C connection on the bottom, but as we saw in the M1 iPad videos, it's a neat addition on the Pro models, but practically, you can't really tell the difference. The accessories for Thunderbolt and iPads just aren't really there yet, so this will still work with the majority of existing accessories. It'll work with the same chargers, it'll work with the same kind of adapters, it'll just be a little slower, both in charging and data transfer. But another identical thing the Air has on the back is the Smart Connector. This allows you to use the same Magic Keyboard on both tablets, and here is really where price comes into focus. Because of how much money you can save getting the Air, you could use that savings to get the Magic Keyboard. And there is not another accessory around that changes how well a device works more than this Magic Keyboard. I've already got several videos talking about this, so I won't dwell on it today. I mean, I've got even a whole 1 year later video on it. But I will say that the Magic Keyboard makes the iPad something special that does not exist anywhere else. And it is a huge reason to get the iPad Air 4 because you can more easily afford the Magic Keyboard to go with it. I'm telling you, fam, this Magic Keyboard, you may say to yourself, Gary, a $300 keyboard is insane, and I would agree with you. It is incredibly expensive, but it is so good when paired with the iPad. That's all the stuff physically. What about internally? Well, the Air might not have the desktop level processor of the M1, but the A14 Bionic is no slouch either. It does have a smaller core count than the M1 or the A12Z found in the older Pro models, but it does have a higher clock speed than the older Pros, and that really makes up a lot of the difference in performance because of it. Now, talking about core counts, I'm talking about clock speeds, but I don't really like talking benchmarks for iPads because it's a mental exercise that I don't think is really worth the time. We still haven't reached the power of the older A12X 2018 Pros, so trying to benchmark a tablet on tasks that don't tax it all that well, okay, one might have higher numbers, but it doesn't matter because the end use will still be the same, and most people buying an iPad are not there to look at all the cool benchmark numbers and the graphs and spreadsheets, and I love a good spreadsheet. I don't really care so much when I'm trying to buy a tablet. The good thing about all of that power, though, is in longevity. Because the A14 is as powerful as it is, you'll get software updates on this tablet probably as long as the components will hold out. The A14 is the same chip inside of the iPhone 12 models, and it's one of the most powerful mobile chips out there. You don't have to worry about getting cut off or cut out of updates next year because as long as the hardware can manage it, Apple will continue to push out updates for it. I mean, with the newest iOS 15, I believe they're still doing updates to the iPhone 6S. No other brand does that. And again, you'll get all that power, you'll get all that functionality, you'll get all of that longevity for half the cost. See, you should buy one. And that's what I love about iPads and what I love about Apple products in general. This is the mid-range option. It's firmly planted between the higher-end Pros and the lower-end like iPad standards. And Apple doesn't cut you out of software features because it's not at the highest end. You'll get the same functionality as every other model. You will miss out on things like Face ID and that higher end monitor and that new wide angle camera, but that doesn't make apps open slower. It doesn't mean you can't run Sidecar. It doesn't mean that you can't play all the games in the Apple App Store, though that also reinforces my argument for the iPad Gen 8 too. That thing is about half the price of the iPad Air 4, and with the A12 processor, we'll still get most of the same functionality. The display is pretty meh though, so that's why I like to focus on the iPad Air. The fully laminated minimal bezel look is exactly what I thought future technology would look like when I was a kid watching my favorite sci-fi movie like Robot Jox. Oh yeah, get that reference. It's just so good because I know of other technology companies that lock down their software and force you to buy higher end products even if their mid-range and lower end devices could absolutely handle and execute those programs. But at the end of the day, so what, right? The iPad Air 4 is just fantastic. It's got all the power, all the functionality, all the oomph that a power tablet needs to have, and it does it all for about half the price. We already talked about this a little in the intro. If there were one thing that I would really say is wrong with the Air, it's that 64 gigabytes of storage. That is pretty low, almost unusably low in mid to late 2021, and I really wish they'd made 128 gigabyte the standard option with 512 as the higher end model. Will you use all of that storage if you have something like iCloud? I don't know, that's a personal thing, but I don't even buy 64 gigabyte SD cards anymore because of how limiting they are. In every single other way, the iPad Air 4 is easily one of the, if not the best tablet on the market today, and one of the best tablets ever made. I wholeheartedly recommend one, and I will continue to give reasons why people should buy them, because darn it, it is worth it. And if you like this video and you want to see some more content on the good old iPad Air 4, here is my playlist covering all sorts of topics from power to accessories to all sorts of cool things. And you can find it by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.